Welcome to another edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. With you, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB here in Kansas City. We're talking Chiefs draft here today. We had Brett Veach talking. He gave his state of the draft press conference. The general manager for the Kansas City Chiefs will discuss after hearing Brett Veach's comments. How do we look at our 7-round mock draft differently? What changes would we make? Who are the 12 or 13 players the Chiefs are grading as first-round picks? That's how many Brett Veach said they had. Do you expect the Chiefs to take a left tackle after listening to what Brett Veach said? They're almost sure to get a running back. That was the vibe that most people got. How likely are they to trade up in the first round? What about trading back? That was, again, a big discussion. You also mentioned the contract status of Trey Smith. Do we think that that is going to get done anytime soon? We're talking about it right here, right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Off and running here on a Friday morning. Remember, you can catch the podcast Friday mornings at 10 a.m. and Tuesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Be a part of the conversation. Already got a lot of people here in the chat room. We can see your comments. I like this one. Red, Gold, and Bold time, baby. I'll take that. That's that's good. We can see your comments in there. You can be a part of the conversation here on the Red, Gold, and Bold. Guys, let's dive into it. We heard Brett Veach's comments. We had our 7-round mock draft where we tried to take a shot at projecting who we thought would go. Sam, how about you? What are you changing from your 7-round mock draft after listening to what Brett Veach had to say yesterday? Is it all going in the trash can and you're beginning anew, or just some tweaks?
No, I nailed it. There was one thing that I would probably change, which is I thought it was interesting that as the consensus around this draft is that it's really deep at defensive line. Brett Veach agrees with that, but thinks it's particularly because of defensive end. He thinks this is the typical interior class you get. I think he said it was slightly better maybe than the average draft class on the interior. He thinks it's where it's really strong as defensive end. And when you go through the mock drafts and use the tools, the PFF thing that we all talk about, I think what often settles to you is that decision, defensive end or interior defensive lineman. And if he really thinks that, and if he thinks that in the first round, I had Derek Harmon for the Chiefs in the first round. Jeff had Nick Skirton, who I was considering between those two. And, he might think if I'm picking the 6th best at one of those positions that he thinks it's deeper at edge. I did have a middle round corner, which is something he mentioned. I did have a middle round running back, which is something he mentioned. So I think the depth of my draft the same. I still really like Derek Harmon, how he could fit in, but it's not like I think they're going to shy away from that pick, but I think option A, option B, he seems to like the edge rushers more than he likes the interior linemen in this draft.
Okay. I think that's an interesting perspective. I got some thoughts on that one. Jeff, though, first, how are you tweaking your 7-round mock draft if you now that you've heard what Brett Veach has to say?
I like my draft the way it stands. I mean, I went with an edge rusher for the very reason Sam just mentioned. I think my sense of it was that was the stronger position, and there are some really good names that should be available when they draft. I'm not as crazy, but I just think if you're going to get a defensive tackle, interior defensive lineman, he has to be a difference maker. And I think what Brett Veach said was that I don't see a lot of difference makers in this. I think I see some good players, but I don't see somebody who's going to step in there and just light the world on fire. So I think if you're going with a first round pick, you want a difference maker. And that's where I see edge being there. I do believe left tackles in play. And if you're going to go that route, second round is going to be the best place to do it. I think the deeper you go, it's been proven through this own franchise that's drafting that they're not going to find great players. So I think second round, they're going to look hard at that position. I went with a running back in the third round. I could change that to corner depending on what's available, but I think that third or fourth round is going to be running back. And then after that, I think they're going to see a lot of corners late and just interior defensive linemen.
Yeah, that's interesting. And he did about the corners. To Jeff's point, one of the things he said was that there maybe isn't those top end guys, right? Yeah. But he really liked the depth, so I think that does.
Meaty, I think he said meaty in the middle. I think is what he said about the corners. Yeah.
So he's fat asses. Are we drafting fatty corners? Is that what's going on? No, but yeah, that is how he put it. Listen, I think Sam. I'm not so sure that you didn't nail it with Derek Harmon. I mean, I think one of the things I wondered. Okay, does that mean if there's a couple of guys like first of all, I don't think Derek Harmon's going to be there. Like,
yeah, and that's part of one of my takeaways, Trent, is I think he's saying there's not as much depth at that position, so those guys that we think might be there, I think he's thinking are not going to be there.
Yeah, using the mock draft that we used as to how the board was falling, I think he would jump all over Derek Harmon in that situation because he knows he's going to get quality edge guys around the corner. So. I think that's one thing, but I really feel like, I felt, hey, I need depth of defensive linemen, right? Like they have to take multiple defensive linemen. And I went Landon Jackson, D-end at 31, and I went Alfred Collins at 66, the defensive tackle. I now think it's more likely to be like D-end, corner, D-end, running back, like that's, and then in the fourth round, wild card, maybe they throw another shot at a tackle. I don't mind my Logan Brown. We mentioned some of the warts that are on that, but it does kind of, I feel like maybe a couple of DNs are coming early, but later in the press conference, he also pointed out that, they want to get George Karlaftis and Duffy extended. So how many DNs do you want on one roster? Right. So DN, we all agree there's no chance that after day 2, they haven't taken a defensive end, right? No chance that happens.
Yeah, but what you just mentioned about having Karlaftis on the roster. One of my other main takeaways from what Veach said yesterday was that just because you think a position might be deep, his lessons over the last 3 years. 3 years they lost a bunch of defensive ends over the course of the season. They ended up having to trade for Melvin Ingram.
Great point.
Last year he said, "I thought we were loaded at wide receiver." Then Hollywood Brown gets hurt in preseason. Rashee Rice gets hurt in week 4. Suddenly they're trading for a wide receiver mid-season. So I think one of his main takeaways is don't think you've got enough guys at any position. There's certainly positions that are more obvious, I think, of need, but I don't think he's going to shy away from any position because he says, hey, we've got this guy on the roster other than quarterback.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. He mentioned 12 or 13 first-round players, right? And we said, we all said that, I think low water man was Sam at 18, Jeff at 19, me at 21. We all agreed they don't have this many on there.
Yeah.
I want to take a shot at who the 12 or 13 are. As you look at your board, I've highlighted out who I think it would be. I'll give you what I think they would.
Well, Stern, there's probably like 8 or 9 consensus, right? So we're talking about the last 5.
Probably. I mean, Ashton Genty, Tet McMillan, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. Those are the 2 tight ends. I've got Will Campbell, and I had Mimbu making it from the offensive tackles. I've got Abdul Carter and Jalen Walker from the edges. I put Mike Green. That would obviously be one I think we'd discuss. I put Mason Graham from Michigan. I might add Harmon to this list, but then Travis Hunter, Will Johnson, and Jahdae Barron at corner were the ones that I figured. I'll bet I'm 10 out of 12.
Yeah, I've got quite a few different, I think, than you.
Okay.
I mean,
who do you got?
I think that the obvious ones that have to be first round grades are Hunter, Ashton Genty, Will Campbell, Mimbu, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, and Will Johnson, to me, are the 8 guys that I think probably every team. Will Johnson is the last one that I guess I couldn't say all 32 would have there, but I think those first 7, all 32 have those. Most teams are going to have Will Johnson as well. And so for me, I put Loveland as a 9th. I mean, you guys know I think he's better than Tyler Warren.
Yep.
I put Tat McMillan there. I put Kelvin Banks there because I think they potentially could grade, some offensive linemen a little bit higher. And then my last ones, I put Mykel Williams and Matthew Golden. And Golden, it was between Golden and Tyler Warren for me. They probably, I guess, might be more likely to have Warren, but Brett Veach talked a lot yesterday about premium positions, and tight end's not one of those. Wide receiver is.
So you went Genty. Give it to me again one more time slowly, just by position.
Yeah. I think I've got it sort of ordered, but I've got
good. Just give it to me so I can highlight it.
Yeah, Hunter, Genty, Campbell, Mimbu, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Jalen Walker. Like I said, I think those are the 7 that every team's going to have.
Okay.
I think most teams are going to have Will Johnson as well. And then I've got Tat McMillan, Loveland, Mykel Williams, Kelvin Banks, and Matthew Golden.
Okay. So that would be the watch list in your mind for, if anyone's on the slide. That's the trade up list, right? That's the purpose of it. Who's your 12 or 13 that you think they've got locked in as their first round picks, Jeff?
I'm closer to Sam. I've got Genty. I've got McMillan. I've got Warren and Loveland. I've got Campbell, Membu, and Kelvin Banks. So that's 7 on offense. And then on defense, I have Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams, Mason Graham, Hunter, and Will Johnson.
So the only difference we have is I was debating between Matthew Golden and Tyler Warren, and Jeff went with Warren and I went with Golden.
Okay. So I mean the likelihood. Did you get a vibe at all? Did anybody think, Jeff? Did you hear anything out of what he said that made you think he feels like anyone's going to be there? Like what on the trade up side of things? They could do it, but out of those 12 or 13. Sound like a guy who was optimistic that they were going to get there?
I think Loveland is going to be the last guy on that list who gets close to them, and I think he's not getting past the Chargers at 22. And so, to me, it's just I think everybody on that list is going to be gone in the top 15, 16. Will Johnson is a bit of a wild card because he didn't run a 40 at all at the Combine or his pro day, and there's some questions about how fast he really is. But there's teams in there who, like Pittsburgh, who like zone type corners who would take a guy like that. And so I just think that you get to 12 or 13 guys, you're not going to see those guys in the 20s, deep in the 20s to where they can make a move at them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, he seems to have the board and not the picks, and he kind of acknowledged that they don't have the picks, right? So,
but he did say, though, that second wave of late first, early second is a stronger category. So there are some guys on this list that probably do fall in that picture that could be within his range. He said Xavier Worthy was a guy last year who fit that bill.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, don't have costly delays, expenses, liability problems in your parking lot. Get a perfectly smooth, beautifully striped lot with Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. At Whataburger, the flavor you've been asking for is back. For a limited time, check out the chicken fajita tacos or grab the Monterey Melt with all those same great flavors you've been missing. Also, for a limited time, check out the all-new Mexican hot chocolate coffee. Or you can try the Mexican hot chocolate shake. That's right, sweet, rich cocoa, warm Mexican cinnamon, notes of brown sugar, and a light kick of chili, swirled in a creamy blend of vanilla ice cream. And don't forget, you can get all your Whataburger favorites and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, proud sponsor of the Red, Gold, and Bold. All right, let's talk a little bit about the left tackle spot. Sam, what did you hear in his, there was a number of questions about the left tackle, about what he thinks about him, whether they're going to be there, whether they're worth it. What did you hear on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I just flat out asked him, is left tackle still something you want to address in this draft? And his answer, I mean, in a roundabout way, but it was definitely yes, that they still will look at left tackle. And, he twice in over a 30-minute presser mentioned that Jawan Taylor's nearing the end of his deal. He's nearing the end of his deal. If you're planning on making him a cap casualty next year, which, look, the writing's on the wall for that anyway. It's not like he's revealing something shocking there, but, the fact that he says it obviously suggests where they're thinking. They, without a doubt, are looking for a left tackle in this draft. But the question is whether or not this class will allow them to marry that need, because we've all talked about it. The guy who could drop there is Josh Simmons, but I think you guys agree with me. The way he's going to drop there is if everyone's concerned about his medical, in which case you're getting a guy that everyone else is concerned about his medical. I think the more likely scenario is if you do trade back, there are some guys in that late 30s that I think could make some sense for him. And, I talked to Ariante Ursary yesterday, the Minnesota kid who's from Ruskin High. He's had a lot of conversations with the Chiefs. He talked to him at the Combine in a formal interview. He's talked to him since. So I could see that being a landing spot, and I think he's projected by most mocks in the late 30s, early 40s. They don't have that pick. Their picks are guideposts around there, but, that could be a spot where they wind up if they're willing to trade back. Josh Connerly for Oregon. We don't know what they feel about these specific tackles, but I do think, based on hearing Brett Veach talk yesterday, that's in play for the Chiefs. As we were sitting here analyzing his defensive line, he's definitely still thinking offensive tackle as well.
Yeah, offensive tackle. Did you hear a guy who felt like he was going to get one in that analysis that he gave to Sam's question, Jeff?
No. I think they understand it's a very difficult exercise. Look, I think we all understand there's not a great crop of people to pick from, but I think what Sam said about Jawan Taylor should not be taken lightly. I think there's nothing wrong with taking a guy who you think, if he doesn't fit at left tackle, could play right tackle for you.
Right.
And you take another shot next year at this. And so I don't think they see it this way, but I think sometimes it feels like fans do, where it's like they got to find a left tackle any which way they can. It's just like the worst thing you want to do is try to take a guy like they did last year and think he's going to be your left tackle and have it blow up on you. I think if you take good football players and you find spots for them, then you actually can live to fight another day. And so I think there's some options there. And I think second round should be where it happens. I don't think third or fourth rounds there's going to be some great options. So I think second round, I agree with Sam, in the 30s and 40s, you're going to have to find somebody or make a move up to get somebody.
Yeah, I heard a guy that's aware of the tackles, but I can see a scenario, but it's going to have to fall into his lap. Like, I don't see a trade up for it, right? I see it's like, okay, there are 5 guys here. He would actually trade down. They sit there and, oh, guess what? The left tackle's still sitting there. We like this guy as a project. But your point, Jeff, about the right side, I definitely think, and Sam's point about, his comments, they're planning on replacing Jawan Taylor next year, right? We know they don't necessarily have Jalen Moore's going to get first shot, it looks like, at being the left tackle this year. He may be the answer at right tackle. But it's clear that they've got an idea. They've got some options this year. They have no firm answer on who their starting tackles will be in September of 26, right? That's wide open.
Yeah.
Jalen Moore gets the first shot. So I do think that, like, my first reaction is like to take the question, do they take a left tackle in this draft? Probably not. Do they take a tackle in this draft? Yeah, I think that gets a lot higher. It just may be a guy that ends up playing on the right side, which is still really, really important. I mean, Penei Sewell, nobody talks about being a bust. In the old days, people would talk about Penei Sewell being a bust because they drafted him to play left tackle, and it didn't work. But he's been the best right tackle in football, and he's been part of one of the best offensive lines in football. So that's considered a successful draft pick because guys rush off both sides now. Like, some of your best rushers are on the left side of the defense, the right side of the offense. And so it is important to solve that right tackle spot. And it's next year will come. That's why one of the things that has always frustrated me is the devaluing of future picks. Like, to me, it's one of the things that general managers, like, I think the analytics world, we talk about how for 120 years, baseball slept on base percentage being more important than batting average, right? For 70 years, the NBA, or not 70, because when they institute the 3-point line, or 40 years, the NBA, 35 years, the NBA slept on how important the three-pointer is. Basketball as a whole slept on it. Now everyone's awake to it. No one's going back to it. I do think that, like, it's not going to be as extreme as those, but the idea that a first-round pick is somehow less, I get it's less in the sense that you don't know it's pick 10, but the idea that a third is less 2 years from now than a third a year from now, or a third now, is ridiculous. Those years will come. Unless you think society is falling, then you're one day going to use those picks. And if you can get a first-round draft pick out of a team for a second-round pick this year, then that pick will be higher. And you should take it. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I'll get your thoughts on this, was he was asked specifically about looking ahead to next year's draft, right? And he said the same thing that I've heard from multiple people. He said, yeah, you see guys along the way like, oh, let's make a note of that guy. He said, but really only quarterbacks are you looking like, okay, that next year's class of quarterbacks are good. He made it clear that the idea that, well, we're not going to take a left tackle this year because we think there'll be 5 great ones next year and we'll definitely get one, is not part of the equation, right? Like, I thought that was telling as well. Jeff, did you hear that? Did that jump at you?
Yeah, well, I think what also ties into that was how much NIL was affecting the potential players coming out in the draft, guys who might take a shot and say, if I'm not a first-round pick, maybe I can get in the league and find a spot and be a second-day pick or whatever. Like, more and more guys, the money they can make as a top-tier player in a good college program compares favorably to what they would get paid as a second, third, fourth-round pick, or outweighs it. And so now you're looking at guys who are coming in the league who are older, who are in that, he mentioned that specifically. Like, we're looking at ages, and it's like we're seeing guys 23, 24 years old come in the league, and we got guys on our team who would still be younger than some of the guys we might draft this year. And so I think that's a bigger factor, is just like, you just don't know what you're going to get now. And I think in the past, you could look at a guy and say, oh, yeah, this guy, a good year, he's going to come out and bounce out. Now that guy, if he's not a for sure fire first-round pick, he may not be available for you.
But does that change anything? Right. Okay. So they get older, but those guys down there, I mean, yeah, Trey Smith is the extreme case of a guy that they took who was 21 years old. They took him in the 6th round, and they're happy to give him a second contract because he's still in the prime of his career at 25 years old. But if everyone you're taking down there, like, most of those guys are one contract guys anyway. They're special teams guys that maybe factor in. And, we can look at it. There's Jalen Watson that you might want to re-sign. There's Isaiah Pacheco. I don't think anyone wants to re-sign a running back, but maybe you do. But Trey Smith is the extreme case. For the most part, I hear that, and that's a common theme around the NFL, and I'm glad he brought it up, and I'm glad you brought it up. But how much does that change? And once we kind of shuffle through all the COVID extra years, then all those guys are all those guys. Like, you funneled out of the guys who stayed. There was kind of a dearth in rounds 5, 6, and 7 for a couple of years. But now, okay, everyone who's going to stay is going to stay, and the system's back on track. I mean, does that really change what you're doing down there?
Well, it's like a second-round pick. Rasheed Rice was making what, $1.5, $2 million this year? Like, there are a lot of guys in college who were getting that kind of money who are star players for high-profile Power 5 teams.
Wait. Just hang on before you go too far. A lot of guys.
Yeah.
I mean, the Ohio State was supposedly the biggest budget.
Yeah.
You have an 85-man scholarship, and they're said to have paid $20 million. There are not a lot of guys getting $2 million.
I'm talking about the draftable guys. I'm talking a lot of draftable guys, not just a lot of guys, period. I know guys like Blake Corum, when he was at Michigan, was getting $2 million, and that was like 2 years ago. I mean, you can get into the 7 figures as a premium all-conference, all-American caliber player who may not be a surefire first-round pick. That's what I'm talking about. Like, are those guys at a premium position, again, at that spot, like, those guys have a lot more options now than they used to, and it affects the way a guy like Brett Veach is going to draft.
I think they're towards. I think some of the guys that are, to your point, there's probably a handful of guys. I bristle at a lot. Fran Brown's returning highest at Syracuse, the head coach of Syracuse. His highest returning, Pena's highest, best wide receiver, came to him and said he wants $2 million. And Fran Brown said, "Go get it, kid." Like, what? Like, that's Ohio State money.
That's Syracuse.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Syracuse. We ain't giving you $2
But
million.
if he gets $1 million, that's still as much as Rashee Rice got paid, right?
Yes, but you're talking about the best player on the Syracuse team. And I'm just saying, again, I'm not doubting that there are guys. I think the idea of there being a lot of guys, like every wideout out there on a Power 5 program is making $1 million, $2 million. I don't think that's the case.
No, I'm talking about premium positions, guys that left tackles, edge rushers, quarterbacks, receivers, guys. I'm not saying like there's 1,000 guys out there making $1 million. I'm just saying that in the pool they're looking to draft for players who are premium level players. I think that's a factor now. Like, are we going to get a guy who wants to come out and play for us, or do we have to wait a year? Because what we're talking about right now is, would this pool be bigger if there were more players in it? And maybe that pool was affected by the number of players who were getting NIL deals who were staying in school.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sam.
I mean, Veach's point is right. Like, his point is that it's unpredictable who's going to be there next year. Yeah. And like, that's why you can't look ahead anymore the way you could in the past, is because you don't know who's going to come out anymore. Whether or not it's a good decision, bad decision is a separate debate, because they're making these decisions. And that has to be factored into the fact that you can't predict and say, well, look, this left tackle is going to be here. This left tackle is going to be here. Look, oh, wow, there's 6 first-round talents at left tackle. You don't know that they're all going to come back or that they're all going to come out.
Yeah. Terry said older guys get one contract. Definitely think it affects the lower UDFAs. I mean, listen, there are all kinds of stories. You know, Membo, that was one of the things, you know, I promise you Membo was not getting big NIL dollars. Linemen are not getting paid substantially. I mean, we know that the Texas has a deal where if you just sign, you get $50,000 as a Texas offensive lineman. At least that was the thing a couple of years ago, that every one of their guys was going to get. I mean, there's money out there, and it definitely does affect the draft. And I think, Sam, you put it best. It makes it a wild card down there, right? Like, you know, it is more like we're not sure what we're going to have. And, you know, listen, I do think, though, as we come 5 years through it, it starts to stabilize a little bit. You start to get a little bit more of a feel. You know, we're not 5 years through it, but I think once we get there, it'll start to balance out. Sam, running back. You've been talking about the running backs, how deep this class is. Brett Veach addressed the running back position. You feel confident that they're going to get a running back somewhere there. He mentioned rounds 1 through 5. There were quality running backs in each one of those rounds. What did you get a feel for where that running back comes off the board for the Chiefs?
Yeah, man, I think he said good likelihood. I think was the phrase he uses. I think it's a good likelihood one of those players ends up on our roster, and then later he thinks it's the deepest class in this draft. I mean, he's not alone in that. There's going to be other GMs that think it's the deepest class as well. I talked about this last year. The fact that I think last year's class was really weak, and that it was going to lend itself to making this class likely to be deeper. So. Look, I think it's telling that he mentioned that 1 through 5 round that you just said, Soren, because 3 years ago in 2022, he said it's deep at the back of the draft. He's like, there's going to be 1,000-yard rusher that comes out of the 7th round. And like I mentioned this before, he's really close on that. I think Pacheco had like 938 or something 1 year.
Right.
But the Chiefs need this. Like, they need a running back, and they need the description he used a couple times was he used the word explosive. And the Chiefs ran the ball a lot more frequently last year than they ever had during the Patrick Mahomes era until they moved Joe Thuney to left tackle and they started throwing the ball more again. But they had the fewest 10-yard rushes in the entire NFL last year. They only had 33 of them the entire year. And Mahomes was responsible for a chunk of those as well. Like, their running game was not capable of putting out explosive runs. And so to me, that tells me, and I think probably next round we'll get into what type, but I think he is hinting at the type of running backs that he wants as well.
What'd you hear at the running back spot, Jeff?
The same thing. I heard the word playmaker.
Yeah,
a couple times. You know, how many putting more playmakers around Patrick, which I think is a very smart way of approaching this. You know, it's very easy to fall into the trap. Not even a trap. I think just the reality. Patrick Mahomes can do a lot of things on a football field, but there is a limit for every quarterback to what they can do if the talent around them is not that great. I think that they severely missed a presence like they had with McKinnon a few years ago, who was not just running the football, catching the football. How many passes were thrown to a running back And a running back did something with it last year.
Not to
Probably
mention
caught on one
pass,
hand.
yeah, and not to mention his pass protection was
Yeah.
the best on the team as well.
Yeah. And so I think as Travis Kelce, again, as he ages out of the NFL, they're going to have to find weapons like that, because you look around the NFL and, Saquon Barkley wasn't just running for touchdowns. He was catching passes and running for touchdowns. That was Josh Jacobs was doing that in Green Bay, and Jahmyr Gibbs was doing that in Detroit. Like, those kind of players are vital to NFL offense this year in these days. And they need to have one on this team this year.
Yeah. By the way, flattery will get you everywhere. Nice call, Greg. You dudes are awesome. I appreciate that. Well done. Kind words there from Greg. Yeah. How about the running backs? You mentioned you got some names.
Yeah.
That fit for you, Sam, that the Chiefs will be looking at the running back spot.
Yeah, I mean, because the other thing he mentioned here was he is looking at kick returner as well. And the fact that, now the punishment for a touchback is the 35-yard line. I mean, everyone in the league certainly thinks there's going to be more kickoff returns. Plus, you have 2 kickoff returners. He wants a receiver, or like he mentioned a couple times in this running back discussion, he'd like a guy that could return kicks as well. So, look, I mocked in that 7-round mock Devin Neal to him. I think that Veach, based on what he said, is I'm not saying they could pick Devin Neal for sure, and I think Devin Neal would fit into this discussion. But I think more so he's going to be looking at speed, and that's the one knock against Devin Neal. If Devin Neal ran a 4.40, he'd be a 2nd-round pick. So if you want to stick local, I think DJ Giddens runs a really good 40 time.
That's one of the first things I went to as well.
But the guy that really stands out to me that fits everything he said was Bashal Tootin for Veach, because he's got 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns in college. He is a factor in the passing game. I think one year, it was a couple years ago, he had 30 catches. Every year, the last 3 years, I think he's had 20 plus. He runs really well. I think he's in the 4.35 range. So to me, that was the name that, after hearing what Brett Veach was talking about and all these different roles he wants the guy to fill, Tootin really stood out to me as a guy that could potentially be on their list.
Is that just going right back down? I mean, I know the speed thing is big, but you got that's part of the running back's got to go through arms, right? You got to make.
Well, he averaged 4.5 yards after contact last year. So that's a pretty sizable number. But
was it 2 carries of 9 yards? Right? Like, did he only get by contact twice? How many tackles?
Well, every time you're tackled, it's contact, right?
Yeah. But
every play has contact, except for touchdowns, not necessarily if you walk into the end zone. But the question I have about him would be a similar question.
I don't disagree. He's on my list, by the way. I don't disagree with you about it.
The question I'd have about him would be the same questions that I think still exist about Isaiah Pacheco, although he breaks tackles at a better rate than Pacheco does. But what's your vision like, behind the line of scrimmage? How quickly do you hit the hole? Because when you watch the Chiefs running game last year, that's what really stands out with running backs is they didn't hit the hole very quickly. Kareem Hunt's was because of speed. Pacheco, I think, because he doesn't see it quickly enough. And so I don't know what they think about Tootin's ability to do that.
Yeah. My point is just that, like, Kareem Hunt didn't run a great 40. But Kareem Hunt, when he came out, I'm talking about, 1.0 with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kareem Hunt could see the hole, and Kareem Hunt could run through arms, right? Like, that to me is a big part of the equation. He could also catch the football. And so, I've always been a little bit worried that Dave Tobe has too loud a voice in that room, that they're, constantly trying to give him some toy and some weapon, and like nobody returns. Like, and this is back when we were still doing the old school kickoffs. They weren't returning kicks yet. Everything was based upon, like, we're going to steal some points in the special teams. I would rather just let's stick with giving Patrick Mahomes, whether it's the ability to block and catch the football. Let's find the best running back for Patrick Mahomes, and we'll figure out special teams later. Like, you don't have to, when you have Alex Smith, or you have just a good quarterback, Derek Carr, then you need to find ways to manufacture touchdowns without your offense. When you have Patrick Mahomes, you just need to let him cook and give him the devices that he needs. You got any backs, Jeff, that jump at you as far as ones that you think would be good fits for the Chiefs? Devin Neal's a popular one, of course, the Kansas back, and I do think he would be a good fit for the Chiefs. You got any names that jumped at you?
Quinshon Judkins was a guy I'd take in my mock draft. Now, whether he's around, they get in the third and fourth rounds is a question, because I think he could go as high as a second. I love watching him out of Ohio State.
They've got that extra early third round pick, so
I
I do think that's a name worth considering.
Yeah, he's a fit. He's played in a backfield with another running back. He's got good size. He's got good speeds in the 4.4 range, but he's a really good receiver. He ran for 1,000 yards in I think as a number 2 back, if you want to call him that, with Travion Henderson. He ran for 1,000 yards in the SEC. I mean, he's their best option. But there's a kid from SMU, I was just looking it up, Trey Smith, who ran in the 4.3 40s or in the high 4.3s, who has good hands, can do some of the things that we're talking about, can be a dual rollback for you. But I agree with Sam. I think it's going to be somebody who's got explosiveness and speed and can make something happen with the ball in his hands.
I'll stand up for DJ Giddens. I mean, I think DJ Giddens, first of all, I think DJ Giddens was one of the more underrated running backs in college football last year. I thought he was outstanding. Yeah. I know K-State, they block well. Their line play is always high quality. But I love what he does. And I think, he's going to go later. And to me, I think Andy Reid would have
What do you mean? What do you mean later?
I think you could get him in the 4th round. Right?
I think it's possible.
I don't know that you can get him with their 4th round because of how late it is.
Yeah.
But if you're moving around on the board and you end up at the top of the 4th round, first 15 picks, first half of the 4th round, he could go there. I might be wrong. Listen, I won't be shocked if somebody goes, okay, here with pick 58, DJ Giddens, K-State. I'll understand why they did it. First of all, his foot speed is just over 4.4 on the 40-yard dash. And I don't know what you watched in his game and didn't like, So I think there are a number of guys that, probably, and like I said, I'm partial to him because I watched all of his games. And if I'd watched all the Virginia Tech games, I may be sitting here going like, this is a first-round talent, right? But I think DJ Giddens, I think he's going to be, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a pro for more than his first contract, right? He'll be a guy that's, running backs just don't get paid in the second contract. But I think you could be seeing fantasy football guys picking him up because he's an impact player. I like him a lot. So we'll see where it goes. We'll talk about trading up. We will talk about trading down right after you hear this from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. We touched on this a little bit, Sam. Trade up, trade down. What did you hear? He talked about both sides of it. I think we all kind of agree. We don't see the trade up materializing in the first round, but other rounds. He did say, like, boy, you put in all this work. You want to go up and get it? He also made a statement where he said, now I'm probably more patient, right? Like, I do think, like, we do all this work and you see a guy and you love him. Let's go up and get him. But you don't have to do it in every round, right? And so it seemed like he had looked back at his drafting history and said, okay, I probably could have held my water here or here or here. What do you think about the trade up, trade down scenarios for him in this draft?
Yeah, he also talked about how important it is to have a lot of picks, which is not something we've really heard from him in the past. But yeah, I think trading up is going to be really difficult when you've only got 12 or 13 first-round grades on guys. But to couple that, Jeff referenced this earlier, he also said that he does think it's really a really strong second wave of players. And I talked about this when we did our mock drafts, that to me, there wasn't a huge difference when you go through some of the mock drafts and go through the exercise yourself. There's not a huge difference. Often there's not a huge difference between like 31 and like 38 in there. And so if there's somebody interested in the set that's, the first 5-6 picks of that second round, you're able to move back and probably fill that 93 pick gap that you have in the 4th to 7th round, potentially even get better there. You mentioned that, like DJ Giddens could come off the board early in the 4th round. Maybe that's the pick you're able to add if you trade out of there. It seems he at least said that that's on his mind. And Soren, you asked him about it, but and I'll let you talk more about it. It's more difficult than people think it is. Having said all this about trading back, I'll believe it when I see it. Like, we've never seen him do it in the first round. Like, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. He did, and he kind of talked about it. He said, I hear every year it's like, well, that quarterback, they'll be coming up to get that 5th year of the quarterback. He said, we've picked in the bottom of the first round every year I've been here, and hadn't happened yet. Right. Like, so we do, I think, as draft nicks and as football fans, we all go, when you see a Clyde Edwards-Helaire that doesn't work out, well, they should have traded down. But if no one's calling, and, I'm quite confident no one called that night, and no one was answering the phone, like everybody shut down and was on to the next day. You got to make a pick when you're there. And I think, that's a lesson they learned that year, and they'll be ready for this year. I do agree, Jeff, with what Sam says about the second wave. I always agree with that. I think if you can look at a lot of drafts, and if you could trade your first for a second and a third every year, do it. Right? Mm-hmm. Take 2 shots from the second and third as opposed to 1 shot in the first, unless you're getting the franchise quarterback, unless you're in the top half and you need the left tackle. But where the Chiefs usually pick in the bottom half, I would love to have a second and a third over a late first anytime. So I think they'll be listening. I think he might actually try it. I think he may, we mentioned answering the phone. There's a difference between answering the phone and calling. I think there may be more calls made about trying to trade down before. I don't know if he'll get it done, but I could see the 4th going to get up into the 3rd. I could see next year, that extra pick they got for Joe Thuney being shipped out right away to get back in for another 3rd. I think Sam's right. The sweet spot's rounds 2 and 3 in this draft, and he's going to try to accumulate picks there.
Well, yeah, I think the fact that he's talking about it is encouraging. And I do think that he's done this enough times now to where he realized you get burned sometimes, right? He's been burned enough time to know that I get so excited about this player that I want to have, and he doesn't do anything. That was a big waste of time and draft capital. So I think that's a good sign. But I also feel like this is a draft where there could be some teams that decide, let's go up and get this quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is going to impact this draft in a lot of ways. If he falls out of the top 10 and starts tumbling down into the 20s, that's going to affect guys like Jackson Dart. That's going to affect the kid from Louisville. There's some people trying to suggest that Jalen Milroe could sneak into the first round. And so they may be sitting there at that pick this year with some teams that aren't willing to invest in those players, in the top 15, but may say, what, into the first round, let's go get him. Let's go get the guy now, because we're not going to have a second chance at this, depending on what's available. So there's, as much as we kind of act like, okay, Cam Ward's the first pick, and then all these other teams drafting in the first round don't need quarterbacks. There's like 7 teams in the top 10 that don't have that long-term answer at quarterback. They have to do something at some point, and the Chiefs may benefit from that at the end of the first round.
Yeah, it's a great point, because last year there were 5 quarterbacks gone, and the first 12 picks was it that Knicks went, and so therefore all those teams that you're talking about potentially trading back into the first round, they already got a quarterback. And when it's a really light quarterback class, Jeff's right. It could be very possible that those teams that need a quarterback don't take one in the first round, and therefore they are more likely to still want to get a guy, at 31, for example. I just opened up the mock draft tool, for example, to see what kind of trade could you get out of 31, because it'll offer you trades as well. And oddly enough, it's the Saints that are offering you a trade at 31, which Colston Loveland is available, by the way. I keep saying that's a very intriguing thought. I think the most interesting possibility for the Chiefs is if Colston Loveland falls.
Yeah.
But at 31, the Saints have the 40 pick. That's probably further back than you want to drop. Although I think, Ariante Ursery could be a guy potentially that's still there at 40. but you drop back 9 picks, you not only get that, so you drop back 9 picks, you get potentially an early 3rd round pick back. They've got like 71, which is like, early first 10 picks of that 3rd round. And you send them back like one of your 7th picks for it. And it's got that as a pretty even deal. I mean, that would be pretty attractive if something like that would pop up in their laps.
Yeah, I think that he'll be looking to acquire picks. I mean, I did think you referenced it. You got to have picks, and I think he's been around long enough, and this is a time that they need those draft picks. I would love to see him pick up a couple of picks next year too. Like I think it's important. That's how you start getting lots of picks is stockpiling those picks. And so,
well, they should just go ahead and offer their 1st round pick next year for anyone else's 1st round pick next year, and just make a bet on this year that they're going to have a better record.
They probably will. That's what history tells us in that situation. All right. How about the Trey Smith comments? He said they'd like to get it done, but he mentioned how busy CAA is. This is going down to the deadline. I think it's July before we see this get done. Sam, what'd you hear?
Yeah, I mean, I heard him explain it as an order of operations thing where, we're concentrating on the draft. His agency, you mentioned Tory Dandies of CAA, they're concentrating on the draft as well. They've got a lot of draft eligible players. I did go through it, and they do have a ton of guys that are going to be drafted. So I can understand why this hasn't been a priority for either of these. I think there's a comfort that this is going to get done. But I agree with you that I don't think that they're like going to resume these conversations from a point where they're almost at the finish line. I don't think they're at the starting line, but I think they're closer to there than they are at the finish line with where they are with Trey Smith. But you also don't, or at least shouldn't, have tagged Trey Smith unless you had a pretty good idea of what it would take to get a long-term deal done like that. You would have done yourself an injustice if his numbers and his requests right now are shocking you.
Yeah. What'd you hear about an extension or about getting a multi-year deal done? He's under their control, but getting the multi-year deal done, Jeff.
Similar. I think that Veach is very optimistic about all this stuff. I think every time he's dealing with a negotiation, or he's always like, "We're going to get this done. We feel good about it," and he kind of deadpans it. But I agree with Sam. Like I guarantee you, he's asking for the moon. Like, you look at the guard market, the way it was last year, and what guys like Robert Hunt got from Carolina Panthers, and the other guy they picked up. It was a lot of money, and I promise you, they're waiting to see what Joe Thuney gets paid in Chicago when they decide to give him a bunch of money. So I don't know. I think it will get done, but I think the numbers are probably going to be more startling than people realize. And if they were sitting here thinking, "Oh, Trey Smith loves it here," and just like Nick Bolton just always wants to be with the Chiefs, like, not everybody's going to have that same attitude about it. This is a guy who was a late round pick who's looking to get paid, and he knows the market's going to be good for him. I think he's going to get a lot of money.
Does it get done, or does he play on the 1-year tag?
I think more likely it does, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it with certainty. But I think, if in the prediction range, I'm saying yes.
Yeah, I'd say yes. I mean, it's not like an Orlando Brown situation where a guy comes in from their franchise looking to make a legacy play. Like, I think cooler heads will prevail here, but again, this was always the risk in tagging him in the first place. The one thing they have going for them is that it hasn't really cost them. They knew they were going to be limited with funds and free agency, so it didn't limit their ability to go out and get what they had to get. But yeah, I think we'll be sitting here in July talking about what's going to happen here.
Well, I will bring up what he said about Joe Thuney. He said, "We hate it. It was gut-wrenching to trade him. We love the player, but we had to do it." Well, you had to do it to hold 23 million. What's the number? I forget the number.
23 million.
23 million open for Trey Smith. That's why you had to do it. Like, you didn't have to put the franchise tag on Trey Smith. Once you did that, you had to clear some room, right? So that's where that happened. And Jeff, I mean, I'll go back, and people didn't like it when you said, "Well, Trey Smith has the leverage," right? And I think he still has the leverage. I think also this is not a guy, which I think, Jeff, you pointed out, one of you two did. This isn't a guy who's been playing under a first-round paycheck. He's been playing under a sixth-round paycheck, which most Americans would be thrilled to get a sixth-round paycheck in the NFL. I want to be clear. But by NFL standards, he needs to cash here and now. And look, offensive linemen can play into their 30s. We're watching Joe Tooney get another big paycheck, at this point. So this isn't like it's all right now. This is it. It's the last dollar you're ever going to make at your chosen career. But it's a big one for him. But I think what you said, Jeff, cooler heads will prevail. I think he wanted to be here. They want him. I think the Chiefs will have to swallow hard and give him like $24 million a year. Like, I don't think there's going to be any discount, but I don't think there's going to be a tax, right? I think once you get to where you make it clear that he is, as good a guard as there is in football based upon what he's making financially, he'll say, all right, let's go play ball. And he'll be in. And the good thing about it is you have to get that done before training camp. That's not something that can linger into training camp. So it forces him. Does he want long-term security? I think, yes, there's no discount, but yes, he definitely wants long-term security because I'm sure he's got a nice bank account. Offensive linemen tend to be the smartest guys in the league after quarterback. So I'm sure he's done very well with his money, but it's life-changing if you can lock in that multi-year deal. And it's tens and tens and tens of millions that you get right up front, guaranteed. And I don't think he'll walk past that.
Well, and the other thing he said, to cut you off, Sam, is that it impacts your ability to go start talking to Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis, right? And every minute you spend waiting for that to happen, their salary goes up, their demands go up. So
yeah, and I think what's a secondary interesting question with this Trey Smith thing is what does the contract look like? Because we've seen Chiefs with long-term contracts backload them. And because the salary cap goes up, it's going to eat up a less percentage of the cap when you backload it. But they've already done the hard part of fitting the 23 in now. And so when you've already pushed the Mahomes money and Chris Jones money to accommodate this figure on your cap, it doesn't make as much sense to me if suddenly you try and lower the cap number now because free agency's passed. Like, I know you want to have some flexibility during the season, but I think it's potentially an opportunity to reorder the way a lot of your long-term contracts on your books currently are.
I agree. And I think I think paying him more now to keep his number later down because you're not signing him now because you think you're going to cut him. This isn't a Jawan Taylor deal. Like, you're planning on him being your guy for 4 or 5 years. And you've got a better chance of making that true if you don't bring him in at 1.5 this year with a signing bonus and then have the last year of his deal be $44 million that you're going to be wiping out. I think you've got a chance to eat more of that money now. That being said, he did also point out, look, we thought we were good and we had to go get guys. I think you always want to run, if you can, 5% below the cap or have a quick and easy way to get there so that if an opportunity does present itself. I don't think any of the opportunities that they went for last year, I don't know that they get the number 1 seed without DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, he was not a huge impact, but they had to have a wideout. He did have a 100-yard game. I think that was an important acquisition. So I think you do need to be able to bring some people on. So you want some flexibility. But Sam, your point is right. They are backloaded on a lot of guys that are going to, they're not the Saints, but you can see the Saints, right? Like, and I don't think you want to be there. And so start being a little bit more responsible today to make yourself better in the future, I think would be a good thing. And you mentioned you've got the cap space already there. So don't bring him down to 8, go ahead and take the hit now.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd encourage people to go look at, Chris Jones, the back end of his deal, and Patrick Mahomes, the back end of his deal. Like, these are really huge numbers. And I'd be really hesitant to add a third really huge number on top of that.
And I'll take it out of your mouth if you're typing right now. Well, they'll just renegotiate the deal. They will, but that huge number then gets prorated out over the next 4 or 5 years. Yeah. It takes those years up. Like, every dollar that is paid to a player will be accounted for on that team's cap. There's no way to trade it away. There's no way to cut it away. Money that they don't pay him won't ever be there. But every dollar that's paid will be accounted on your cap. And, I'll tell you what, I'm going to talk to Gus Kattengill down in New Orleans today on the program in our 2-minute drill. And we're going to discuss that the Saints talent sucks and they've got problems with Derek Carr, but their roster is just getting worse and worse and worse because they just keep pushing it off and they're getting worse as a team. And you don't want to be there. You want to be good for every year Patrick Mahomes is here, not just better for this year. And so yeah. I think Sam's point is great. You got a chance to do something here, responsibly. with him. Use the cap space that you've already carved out. You can, of course, support the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast by supporting our great sponsors like Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best when it comes to your parking lots. A brightly striped lot cuts down on accidents, cuts down on liability, cuts down on hassles and costs for you and your business. Get it done right now. Call Gann Asphalt and Concrete today at 816-484-3338. Online at GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. Our friends at Northland Injury Law. If you've been hurt in an accident, text Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers by texting HURT to 22222. That's HURT, H-U-R-T, to 22222, or just call 816-400-HURT. And Whataburger. Our friends at Whataburger are open 24 hours, serving breakfast 11 p to 11 a. And I'm happy because some of my favorites are back. Check out them online. Remember, you can get all your favorite Whataburger dishes and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, a proud sponsor of the Red, Gold, and Bold. For Jeff Chadiha for the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.